It's Thursday, October 20. In the headlines, gas prices down by more than $4. Zones of special operations extended. Education minister calls on students to be promoters of peace. Regionally, St. Vincent and the Grenadines finance minister speaks on the benefits of a public sector wage increase. And on the international scene, the UK's Prime Minister resigns less than 2 months in office. And in sports, Sunshine Girls taste victory twice. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Minister of Education and Youth Favour Williams wants students to be promoters of peace. Minister Williams addressed the matter of conflict resolution on Tuesday during the ministry's Just Medsit initiative to end violence in schools.
We do have a problem of violence in our schools. Approximately 80% of Jamaican children experience some form of psychological or physical violence administered as discipline. 65% of students are bullied at school. 79% of children witness violence in the home or in the community. And these figures come from UNICEF's situational analysis that was done in 2018.
The education minister says in 2019 alone, 560 persons between the ages of 12 to 19 years were arrested for Category 1 crimes.
For robbery, for break-in, for larceny. The reality is many aspects of the violence that is played out on a daily basis in our society are also being displayed in our schools.
She notes the use of the ministry's security and safety guidelines established in 2008. She says the deans of disciplines are working alongside the guidance counselors in schools. She admits that the number of guidance counselors are not enough and says their numbers will increase as the budget allows.
Some time ago as well, we introduced the school-wide positive behavior intervention support, SWPB's framework, that places emphasis on the prevention of problem behavior, the development of pro-social skills, and the use of data-driven problem solving for addressing existing behavioral concerns. We implemented the health and family life education curriculum to focus on the delivery of a comprehensive life skills-based program and on the development of the whole person. And recently, my colleague Minister Chuck, has been going around to schools with the Restorative Justice Practice Initiative, which is something the Ministry of Justice wants to expand in our schools, and I welcome that.
Minister Williams says she is motivated to find sustainable ways to combat the problem of violence in schools.
I am not prepared to throw my hands in the air, and I hope you are not prepared to do that as well. I know that there's been a long-standing issue of indiscipline in our society and schools, and those are splashed almost instantaneously across social media platforms. I'm committed to ensuring that our schools are safe spaces for teaching and learning.
She is calling on all stakeholders, especially students, to continue to stand with teachers and end violence in schools.
So I'm imploring all who are here today and those within the reach of my voice to pledge to be part of the solution to end violence in our schools.
Today, October 20, is World Food Day. On this day, the focus will be on the millions of people worldwide who cannot afford a healthy diet and the need for regular access to nutritious food. As Jamaica joins the rest of the world in observing the day, Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, Pernil Charles Jr., says local celebrations will center around a national ceremony and exhibition at the Vere Technical High School in Hayes, Clarendon. He told JIS News, quote, "This ceremony is being hosted by the collaborative efforts of the Ministry and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations under the theme, Leave No One Behind. better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life for all." End quote. The minister says the government is working to foster increased access in the sector through the existing Production Initiative Program and opportunities through the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA. The minister also notes that the government has incorporated an element of the National Grow Smart, Eat Smart program in schools. Members of the lower house approved the motion to extend the Zones of Special Operations, ZOZOs, on Tuesday. The ZOZOs have been extended by another 60 days. The ZOZOs in Mount Salem, Denham Town, Greenwich Town, August Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens and Savannah Lamar were set to expire on October 22. Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang, who piloted the motions, argued that ZOZOs have served the people well.
Communities are being transformed and residents now have hope and a level of optimism about their future and the future of their children. The human, social, economic and infrastructural investment that are being made in these communities have renewed the hope of the residents, increased their agency and restored a sense of safety and security within the space.
Dr. Chang says the implementation of a targeted operational strategy has resulted in significant reductions in all major crimes in the zoned communities.
As we advance work in the build phase, we'll increase surveillance within these communities in order to provide an additional layer of safety and security for residents as we wind down some of the numbers of our security element. This is towards the sustained reduction of crime and violence within and around the communities identified.
The Law Reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures law is aimed at curbing the nation's crime through security force occupation of vulnerable communities. It also aims to preserve human rights during the period of occupation. The Integrity Commission wants more flexibility in the formalities governing investigations. Executive Director of the Commission, Greg Christie, says giving the Commission more room within the ambit of the law to investigate would bring more order and compliance to the investigative process. The matter was discussed during a recent Joint Select Committee, which is reviewing the proposed changes to the Integrity Commission Act. Executive Director of the Commission, Greg Christie, says giving the Commission more room within the ambit of the law to investigate would bring more order and compliance to the investigative process, as was the case when the Office of the Contractor General operated as a singular entity.
Basically, as Contractor General, you had certain powers, and basically the Contractor General was given the powers of a judge of the Supreme Court. And you had the authority to summon witnesses and to swear them under oath, except that you did not have to go through the strictures that you typically have in a court of law. I, for example, would issue requisitions to persons who I would want statements from, and it was backed up by Section 29 of the Act.
Poring over a list of proposed changes to the Integrity Commission Act, Christie notes that no equal provision has been made in the bill to replace the repealed Section 22, subsection 1 of the Contractor General Act. Christie says, given the complexity and variety of matters which the Commission deals with, the legislation should be amended to include that the proceedings of the Commission or the Director of Investigations shall not be rendered void for want of form.
There's no prescribed form. That's what the provision is saying. Right. There's no prescribed form. And that's how that act was developed by Prime Minister Golden. There's no form.
The former Contractor General argues that the lack of this structure is what had helped his office during his tenure to substantially improve compliance rates by public sector entities to provide quarterly reports on contracts. Christie explains that under the now repealed provision, no challenge could have been mounted against the state on the basis of form procedure.
You have to comply with rules of natural justice, for example, giving somebody an opportunity to be heard. Yeah. But Director Kevin can speak as to how he conducts his hearings. It could be that he probably calls in somebody and he wants to call them in tomorrow
Right.
or next week. And that person could say, well, you haven't given me enough notice.
Right.
I have had several situations as contractor general where persons refused to comply with your request. But it was backed up by a provision which says once it's a lawful request, I'm not asking you to do anything unlawful, you have to comply.
The commission was established in February 2018, subsuming the powers of the Office of the Contractor General, the Corruption Prevention Commission, and the Parliamentary Integrity Commission. Coming up in the business report, gas prices down by $4.50, and Statin reports on Jamaica's export sector. We have more on that data, plus other market updates from our reporter, Denita Rodney.
Motorists will pay less for gas when they go to the pumps on Thursday, as state-owned oil refinery Petrojam says down by $4.50. E10 87 and 90 will sell for $189.16 and $193.13 per liter respectively. Up by $3.06, automotive diesel oil will sell for $228.07 and ultra-low sulfur diesel will sell for $235.05 per liter. The price of kerosene down by 25 cents will sell for $222.18. In the meantime, propane cooking gas down by 70 cents will sell for $61.06, while butane down by $3.06 will sell for $66.83 per liter. Remember that retailers will add their own markups to the announced prices. The Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin, is reporting that the total spending on import for the period January to June 2022 saw a 37.7% increase.
This increase was largely attributable to higher imports of fuels and lubricants, raw materials, intermediate goods, and consumer goods, which went up by 70.7%, 28.5%, and 33.8% respectively.
Director General of Statin, Ms. Carol Coy, says, however, for that period, domestic exports saw a 3.3% decrease.
Domestic exports accounted for 82.3% of total exports and were valued at $659.6 million, a decline of 3.3%. The decline in domestic exports was due to a 65.5% decline in the value of alumina exports. The manufacturing industry, however, exports from the manufacturing industry, however, increased by 32.2% due to a 60.4% increase in the exports of refined petroleum products.
She was speaking at Statin's quarterly press briefing on October 18. For-year market updates, in foreign exchange trading for Wednesday, October 19, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.68. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $111.71. The pound sterling traded for $174.35, and the euro sold for an average of $153.86. In GSE trading, the GSE index declined by 906 points. The junior market index advanced by 24 points. The combined market index declined by 620 points. And the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by 1,165 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 106 stocks, of which 47 advanced, 48 declined, and 11 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 1834 Investments Limited, and AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Viable Preference, Access Financial Services Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Trading firm were CAC 2000 Limited, Cargo Handlers Limited, and Carreras Limited. The overall volume leaders were Wigton Wind Farm Limited Ordinary Shares, One-on-One Educational Services Limited, and Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited with over 1 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund was the volume leader with over 50,000 shares, followed by Calypso Macro Index Fund with 122 shares being traded. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Goddard Enterprises was the sole security trading 2,000 shares. In market data for oil prices rose by more than $1 in response to tighter supplies and on news that China is considering a cut in the duration of quarantine for inbound visitors. Brent crude futures rose $1.15 to $93.56 a barrel, and West Texas Intermediate crude rose $1.54 to $87.09 per barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Denita Rodney.
In regional news, we start in the Bahamas. Labor Minister Keith Bell says inflation was one of the main deciding factors in the Davis administration's decision to raise the country's minimum wage.
Prime Minister Philip Davis announced the increase from $210 to $260 in his national address last week. Here's Keith Bell addressing Parliament today on the rationale.
If we consider the period between the last increase to the wage by the Progressive Liberal Party in 2015 and now, it is noted that in the first 6 months of this year alone, the Department of Statistics reported an inflation rate of 6.6%, the highest rate we have seen in recent times. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the final analysis, the government weighed the balance and concluded that we must move to protect workers against unduly low pay and help to ensure a just and equitable share of the fruits of their labor.
Bell says this year makes 2 decades since the Minimum Wage Act was implemented back in 2002 by former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham. He added that government also had to take into consideration Section 131 of the International Labour Organization Convention on Minimum Wage. As for those who think the increase is not enough,
I wish to make it clear to persons who are employed, who work incredibly hard and cannot survive off the current wage of $210 per week. The government is not saying that you should only earn $260 or that the sum is adequate. No. Indeed, the government recognizes that the minimum wage must, in time, be transitioned into a wage that is appropriate for today's costs of living.
In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, speaking in Parliament this week, Finance Minister Camila Gonzalez says the announced public sector wage increase for 2023 will positively impact the private sector, and he explains how.
First, the government, in announcing the salary increase for next year, also announced that they were convening the Wages Council before the end of this year, and that Wages Council is expected to increase the minimum wage for all workers. That is private sector workers as well. That's the first thing. So on the minimum wage side, the government will adjust the minimum wage. And that has been announced, the same time that we announced the salary increase. Secondly, in reducing personal income tax, and increasing the threshold for taxes, it means that all workers, public and private sector workers, will pay less income tax next year, which will mean they will have more money in their paycheck next year. The tax cuts as well, at the corporate level, will allow the private sector employer more money on hand, which they can then invest in their workers, either in the form of hiring additional workers or in increasing their wages. Why? If you're making more money in the public sector, the private sector has to compete to hire people who would otherwise go and work in the public sector. And if more people are getting jobs, labor becomes scarcer, you have to offer more money to get people to leave where they're working to come and work by you. So if you are raising wages in the public sector, and if your economy is growing and more people are being employed as a result of growth, it has an upward effect on private sector wages. Additionally, productivity impacts private sector wages. The unemployment rate affects private sector wages. If unemployment is low, wages will have to climb. Hours per worker And yes, inflation affects private sector wages because the private sector employee will also be able to make demands of their employer for wages. Those are all empirically related factors between public sector wages and private sector.
In Trinidad and Tobago, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries Stuart Young says the TT government is working with the United States government to address the issue of climate change in the region. We have more in this report.
Addressing energy experts at a conference focused on the future of U.S. Caribbean energy cooperation on Wednesday, Minister Young addressed some of the discussions held following the Summit of the Americas.
One is how do we get the financing, how do we get the ability to help in the smaller Twin Islands, the smaller states, smaller countries, Caribbean countries that make up CARICOM, to bring renewables and renewable resources, knowing that the financial side won't always be there. Of course, what I've left out is, of course, we suffer in this region from the direct effects of the climate change. So some of the decisions we're taking now in Trinidad is to clean up the energy sector.
President of Goldwyn Global Strategies, David Goldwyn, suggested that the United States improve its level of engagement in addressing energy security and climate change in the region. Goldwyn, who is also chairman of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's Energy Advisory Group, warned that the solution may not be a one-size-fits-all approach.
And the solutions to energy security and climate problems vary significantly with the recent resource endowment of the island, the ability to connect with other islands, the size of the population, and geography and geology. So solar and wind are solutions in some places, but electrification of transportation might be the solution in other places, or geothermal or distributed generation. And due to the extreme weather, resilience is also a major issue.
Mr. Goldwyn suggested countries find ways to alter their energy economy at scale rather than per project as a way to measure the scalability of the change.
In international news, Liz Truss has resigned as Prime Minister of the UK. It follows a turbulent 45 days in office, during which Truss's mini-budget crashed the markets. She lost 2 key ministers and shed the confidence of almost all her own MPs. Prime Minister Liz Truss, in a statement outside Downing Street, said she could not deliver the mandate on which she was elected. There will be a Conservative leadership election to be completed within the next week. We have more about how this happened from Al Jazeera.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Unless we get our act together and behave like grown-ups, I'm afraid many hundreds of my colleagues, perhaps 200, will be leaving at the behest of their electorate.
I've got the list here. 45p tax cut, gone. Yeah. Corporation tax cut, gone. 20p tax cut, gone. 2-year energy freeze, gone. They're all gone. So why is she still here?
I would prefer this government to be judged on its appalling treatment of the worst off and the poorest within our society. The reality is that inequality in Britain is deeper than ever before. Poverty, homelessness, hunger are increasing amongst the poorest people. And the government has refused to say whether it will even raise social security benefits in line with inflation, and there are big wage disputes going on in all the major industries.
In sports, the Sunshine Girls continues their winning streak. The girls beat Grenada 74-48 on Wednesday evening at the National Indoor Sports Center to make it 5 straight wins in the America's Netball World Cup qualifiers. The Jamaicans also won the match against Antigua and Barbuda 80-23 on Wednesday. They will next play St. Lucia on Thursday evening at 6:15 p.m. In other games on Wednesday evening, Trinidad and Tobago recorded their second victory on the day, beating the United States 43-27 to assume sole leadership once again on 12 points. Barbados also had a double success after completing a 57-36 victory over St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Cayman Islands got by Antigua and Barbuda 47-42 to score their first win for the tournament. In other sporting news, Cricket West Indies and the Pakistan Cricket Board have agreed to postpone the 3-match T20 International Series that was due to take place in January 2023 in Pakistan to the first quarter of 2024.
A release from Cricket West Indies media stated that the decision has been made considering 2024 is an ICC Men's T20 World Cup year, with the event due to be hosted in the West Indies and the USA in June 2024, and the shortest format matches will therefore help both the sides to prepare for the tournament. The 3-match T20 series in Pakistan, scheduled for January 2023, was not part of the recently announced 2023 to 2027 ICC Future Tours program. The West Indies played their ICC Men's Cricket World Cup Super League matches against Pakistan and Multan in May 2022, while the December 2021 series comprised 3 T20s in Karachi.
Trinidad and Tobago will host the Caribbean Track Cycling Championships in November at the National Cycling Velodrome in Cuba. This year's event will also feature some exciting junior action.
Patrice Charles, Director of Physical Education at the Sport in the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, says the ministry is in full support of the Caribbean Cycling Championships.
On behalf of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development and the Minister, Ms. Shamfa Kojo, we are pleased to partner with the TTCF Sport Company in the hosting of these games. It was done, the organizing of this was done quickly but effectively.
The government has pumped $1.4 million into the event, which takes place from November 11th to 13th. President of the Trinidad and Tobago Cycling Federation, Rowena Williams, welcomes the Caribbean cyclists to Trinidad and Tobago, while adding there's added bonus for the cyclists taking part.
And this event is being held in November 11th to the 13th. It is an event that is going to be used as a qualifier for the CAC Games for the Caribbean cyclists. So we expect that all the Caribbean countries will come and take part in the event in an effort to secure a spot for their cyclists in the CAC Games next year.
In an effort to help our junior cyclists prepare for future competition, the Caribbean Champs will be open to them.
It's going to be a junior elite event, so it's open to the junior category as well as the elite, as we prepare again our cyclists for the Youth Commonwealth Games also next year. So we have opened the event to both junior and senior cyclists. Of course, we still have to select our national team. It's not selected as yet, but we do have a national team at the junior level and the senior level.
The TTCF is working with the TTFA in hosting the visiting cyclist at the home for football. Kent Fuentes, TTT Sports.
And that's it for the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBCJamaica. And remember, we are the People's Station.